that's not it. I want to say it was, so it was a big cam, it was a big hydraulic roller deal. We had airflow research heads on it, had the single plane on it, and had a turbo that was way oversized for what we were trying to do. Because 88 millimeter turbo at 1,000 horsepower, I mean, it'll work. It's, you know, it's a big, I think this was a T6 or mid-frame turbo. This was a, you know, we had way more turbo than we needed. And also, if you take a look at the photo, the configuration is it borders on nonsensical. So the reason that all of this started, the reason the way that we had the big turbo blowing into the bottom side of the aftercooler. I mean, the intercooler core doesn't really care what is up or what is down, but traditionally that sort of thing, that bottom part is what bolts to the intake manifold, and then you're blowing through the core, and you would be running it basically on a fuel injected version of a carbureted intake. Like, for instance, if we had port injection done on this, on the funnel web, then we could use this and just bolt all that on top of there. Then it would just be a big intercooler basically going to it, and then we would control all the fuel injection. And that's originally what we wanted to do. Unfortunately, we had problems with fuel injection. I don't remember if it was a problem with the box or the pump, but something was going on that we couldn't use it. So we're like, look, I still got to run this thing. I still got to try to make 1,000 horsepower. So let's try to figure a workaround for this. And we're like, well, let's just do it as a blow through carbureted deal. And they're like, okay, well, great. Now how can we? Nobody was running 85 back then. And we could have done that, and we quite honestly we could have made, given this thing was easily a 500 horsepower motor. So 1,000 horsepower would have come at almost no boost at all. 14 pounds, 15 pounds would have been fairly easy, but that's not what we did. Instead of just putting it on and do a blow through, put an air to air intercooler or something in the middle, what we did was, okay, well, we're going to run this thing. We didn't have a blow through carburetor either, but I'm like, look, I'm not going to let that hold me back. We have these enclosures, so we'll get an enclosure that I have from VORTECH that we'd run before, and we'll put a carburetor in there, which was a quick fuel carburetor, I think. No, I think it was a Barry Grant carburetor. Mighty Demon probably is what was in there. And then we enclosed that. And then what I wanted to do is I also wanted to incorporate the intercooler. So I had, if you look at the photo, if you look at the lid that goes in there, the throttle body or the inlet tube goes in at an angle. They do that for packaging. So because this lid and the carburetor enclosure is used with like a centrifugal supercharger, like a VORTECH, and then that way it packages nice because the discharge tube runs alongside, blows up into it, and it works. So then what we did was take another one of these lids and flip it upside down so that the angles made it up. It was like this, so that the angles made it up like this. And then the other lid would be the bottom side now of the intercooler, and then we would be blowing into what would really be the bottom portion of the intercooler. And then you got to run all of this manifolding to run all the water going in and going out, and it was problematic. It was problematic controlling the boost. It was problematic getting the air fuel correct. And then to top it off, because we're using this enclosure and a non-blow-through carburetor, it took a long time to get the thing to try to dial it in. And every time we had to dial it in, we had to take this whole configuration apart to change the jetting and stuff, take the carburetor out, and it was way more power or way more trouble than the eventual power output was worth. And especially now, we look at what do we do when we want to make 1,000 horsepower. You just get a junkyard 5.3 and put ring gap in it, and put almost any kind of camshaft in it, and put an S480 turbo on it and an intercooler and E85, and and away you go. And it's somewhat simple, and we've come so far. And this is an example that I've come so far in now. Because before 1,000 horsepower was like the holy grail, several decades ago. was the holy grail of everything. The only guys that were making 1,000 horsepower were like, real dedicated race guys or whatever. But I remember distinctly now having the conversation with, I think that this turbo was a TURBONETICS or an Innovate turbo, was one of those guys. And I remember having the conversation with them. They're like, well, what size turbo do you want? I'm like, well, I've tested this and this and this. I really think we need to go with something quite a bit bigger to get 4-digit power. There are like, you guys have an 88. They're like, you probably don't need an 88. I'm like, no, I really do. I need an 88 millimeter turbo. I need a 1,500 horsepower turbo to make the 1,000 horsepower that I want to make. And obviously it works and could possibly put you in a favorable spot on the compressor map, is the way that I would argue in favor of my choice. But my choice is just a bad choice. It wasn't the turbo that I needed. Like I said, the thing was like, it was seriously heavy. I remember picking this thing up and putting it on the mount, putting it on the flange for the exhaust. And I'm like, man, the turbos make a lot of power, but this was like lifting up a supercharger. It was ridiculous. So, but it goes to show you how all of the, first, it goes to show you that not all of my dyno testing goes like perfect. In fact, that would be the exception and not the rule. I know that for a lot of guys, it appears like, oh, look, it all just goes so smoothly. Yeah, in a 10-minute video or 15-minute video where we were here and then we got to here, but that may be days or weeks or months that happened in between there of other things that happened that aren't included in the video, because you can't put all of the trials and tribulations of stuff that where you were struggling with the ring package or you lost the cam bearing or whatever. Sometimes if that's the video, we go over that. But this was just not a good, I obviously will always remember it, but not because it was a positive experience. I mean, it did make over 1,000 horsepower. So whenever you add 13 or 14 pounds of boost to this kind of thing, and it makes power, but it didn't do it. It didn't do it the way that we would do it now, like where you could just make another, like when we were doing the big bang stuff at 1,000 horsepower, we just keep making runs at it and throw 1,000 horsepower out and run after run after run and run. This thing made 1,000 horsepower like on 2 of the pulls. I'm like, okay, I'm done there. For whatever reason, we can't get the airfield good in the load in point and the middle part, and then also the high RPM. And so then it wants to get rich, and then to make it good up here, it wants to get rich down here and all that. So we just made some runs where it showed the 1,000. I think it showed like 1,004 or something like that. It just showed the number that we wanted. So we wanted to be official, because I think it showed numbers in the 990s a couple of times, and they're like, yeah, that's close enough. I'm like, no, if we're here, it has to officially show a 4-digit number, and not like we saw it a couple of times on the readout. And then the dyno doesn't grab that number because it's grabbing numbers every 100 RPM. And we may see it in between 2 of those grabs. So it has 999.9 here and 999.9 here. And in the middle, it has 1,000.01 or 02, except it went right over that. It didn't grab that. So we didn't get it officially. So I said, look, we have to get it officially. So I'm not going to say that I'm not going to round up, even though you can round up from 999.9 to 1,000. I think that's pretty legit. But I just wanted to see the number on there. And so we did get that. But it was just, compared to what we're doing now, it was just ridiculous. And I think back at a lot of these projects that were like this, and it doesn't really have to be that hard. and it wouldn't be anymore. I would have made that a fuel injected motor, and a small block, like later on when we did the 347, or like when we did the 363, we just put like 15 or 16 pounds on it, and it just made the numbers. It's really simple. And we had the right size turbo on it, and we had, and it just did what it's supposed to do when you have all of the things that are correct. And so, it goes a long way. But I want you guys to know that people, if you're out there struggling and it's not going perfectly for you, it may appear that way sometimes in YouTube land, but that's not the way it goes for me either. In fact, though, that's not the way it goes for most people, I don't think. Let's see what you guys are doing. Let's see. So we need a poll for tonight. hole going down here. Okay, where are my rod ratio people? Where are my bore to stroke ratio people? So is a 327.4 with a 3.2 inch stroke better than a 347.4 with a 3.4 inch stroke? So do you want less stroke there? And by the way, the rod length for those two would be the same. They both have 5.4 inch rods. So Richard, what's going on, man? Hola, everyone. Minnesota's in the house. Nice. Nice and warm up there, I would imagine, right? Is it single digit temperature there? I made a few mistakes, but I'm not ashamed. I bought a few Fords, like a Ford GT or a Cobra Jet. Power hour, that's right. Red tail hawks eat the squirrels. Todd, what's going on, man? Got my Ford going today. Nice. Russell, Russell, are you the one that has the 221 in the Ford? What you needed for the engine was a chili bomb. That's right. I need to run the chili bomb. I kind of want to run the chili bomb on something small. The 2.2 is going to be perfect for the chili bomb. Some decisions are tough. Heads, cam, and intake or supercharger on an LS2. Oh, easily the supercharger. I'm still finding damage after the import face-off. Broke some subframe mounts. Glazed my flywheel and clutch and damaged the tie rod. Man, you did it up. Who just leaves the camshaft on the floor like that? It really does need to go in the spot. It needs to go up. It's usually on display right here, along with the other one. You can see there's one over there. Ta-da! So now we have the camshaft Hall of Fame there, the Wall of Fame. Have you seen the futuristic-looking Hyundai with a DeLorean influence? I have not seen that. What is the maximum boost in a CARB enclosure that a CARB can handle? I don't know. I don't think the carburetor cares, and I don't think that the at least the parts of the carburetor don't care, and I don't think the box cares. I don't know what the sealing limit is. Those things have pretty thick flanges and stuff on, and a lot of retaining bolts. So I don't think that that's going to be an issue. I just don't know when the CARB will keep what the maximum boost is. A CARB will keep metering effectively at. My bad decisions. I keep changing my mind on my build, and it costs me more and more. Yep, don't get it right. Get it running. I missed 600 by 2 horsepower, and no matter how much we tried, it wouldn't give us a 600. I've been down that road a bunch at West Tech. That's when we start breaking out the C16 or the lightweight oil or that kind of stuff. What am I doing? Friday, some guys racing on the 101 spun out in front of me. I went through the debris cloud and had to change my Comanche radiator today. Oh, you got parts go through it, man? I wanted LSA, and now I fell down the rabbit hole. Sometimes free stuff is expensive. It's single digits below the donut here in North Dakota. Richard, running my Yukon on a Mustang dyno, I'm getting a wavy graph all the way through. I'm thinking it's because I didn't command the torque converter to lock in third gear. Is this an issue on the road? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about in terms of the curve, and I don't know that I've seen that on a chassis dyno. Have you seen a new GT45 for max speeding with a billet compressor wheel? I have not. Innovative made good turbos, but their electronic boost controller back in the day was awesome. We ran a 70mm turbo on our funny bike. I don't talk about too big of a turbo yet. That's a good sized turbo. That's probably, you were probably making a lot of power though with the bike engine. Built-in custom 2.5-inch stainless dual exhaust with cats for my Silverado. No such thing as a free puppy, and 2 free puppies is way worse. Pontiac, the plus 4, they've advanced the intake center line. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to Summit Racing, and Summit Racing has a camshaft like calculator that will calculate degrees of overlap, and try plugging in some numbers there, and you'll get to play with it. Because you know what the difference is between the intake center line and the lobe center line and the lobe separation angle. You know what the difference between those two is? We should maybe have a discussion about that for one of these. We'll talk about that. I haven't run the Pontiac 350. That's a good point. It's actually just sitting in storage right now. Plus 4 doesn't mean the cam is advanced 4 degrees. Not the same way that advancing the cam like on a cam sprocket does. Bam, 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 bam. No, I'm wrong about that. I think that is the same. Because we can't adjust lobe separation angle once the cam's ground. I wonder what kind of power the 350 makes. I would say less than 350. Oh, let me see here. Ideal camshaft lobe center line. Let's see. Any gains to running a solid lift or setup on an LS engine? Guys do it on race motors where they're running lots of RPM, but otherwise, no, you shouldn't do it for your average 5.3 from the junkyard. Putting a 4.8 in a Volvo, that's good. I have a 92, excuse me, 351. Turbo Century, excuse me, what you're trying to do is improve the flow. And so you don't know what you're doing. I don't mean that. I don't mean that the way that sounded. Nobody knows what they're doing to the head, if it's improving the flow or not, until you measure it. So the things that you're doing may be beneficial, but they also may be detrimental. They can also be beneficial at some lift range and then detrimental at other lift ranges. It's a real thing. You should, if there's a lots of overhang, like where the valve seat transitions into the bowl area, then knock all of that down, make that transition smooth, and you can make that bowl area a little bit bigger. But what you don't want to do is then put another ridge where that has to make a turn to the short turn. And I don't know that I would play with the short turn too much from a factory one. I wouldn't do it myself. I wouldn't do that without a flow bench, so that I know what I'm doing is going to be the right beneficial thing. I'm having a motor built with a Dart LS next block with a set of Dart Pro and heads. I'll be using a Pro Charger. Do you think that's a decent combination? But I don't really know about the rest of the combination. Like, I don't know what intake you're using. I don't know what the camshaft is. What Pro Charger are you using and how much power do you want to make? Those are the key elements. The Pro Charger is going to dictate how much power this thing makes, whatever Pro Charger you use. If you use the P600, it's not going to make very much power. If you use an F1A94 or an F2 or an F3 or whatever, then you can make lots of power, assuming that the motor will hold up. But all of those things that you've said there, the Dart block and the Pro One heads, all of that obviously will work with boost. Have you ever done a 351 Windsor versus a 350 Chevy? Yes, the video is up already, but they were pretty mild ones though. You put aluminum 5.3 in your Fox, that would be good. I would love to have that in there. Currently has a B23 with a cam, polished throttle body, fuel system, and 57mm turbo and speedy standalone, but really want to get the LS swap. So do you know what that B23 makes? How much boost is it running? I keep debating a 5.4 swap in my 4.6 non-PI Crown Vic. Well, how will that fit? How will that package? Will it still package in there? Interesting test would be how much effect drive-by-wire throttle body angle versus RPM affects torque. You want wide open throttle for maximum torque. I've already run that test. We've run 50% throttle and 100% throttle, and anything less than 100% throttle is gonna make less torque. Part throttle or part throttle angle in a throttle body is not going to add torque. You want it to be all the way open, because the torque production is going to come from the intake manifold and not the throttle body. F1A94 on a Brian Tooley cam. Yeah, the F1A94 is going to be a 12 or 1300 horsepower blower probably. I ran a 350 Pontiac and a 1980 Trans Am. It's like the first time you see a Trans Am. And I daily drove for 3 years back in the mid-90s. I built with a 10.5 to 1. Oh, heads. Okay. Perform RPM intake manifold. Person torque 30 cam, long tube headers. Nice. I think that this thing does have some sort of Edelbrock intake manifold on it. Although after doing the factory 4-barrel manifold, I think I'd rather have the factory Pontiac 4-barrel one. Brian, you built an L33 with 480 horsepower and peak torque. Peak torque is under 6,000, but peak horsepower is probably not under 6,000. In fact, I'm certain that it's not. I'm guessing peak power was at, I don't know, 63 or 6,400. Spark plug test. Fast intake, yeah, 6,400 is 480.7 horsepower. That has the fast intake, a 102 throttle body. It had the Brian Tooley red hot camshaft in it. 80-pound injectors, inch and 7/8 headers. It was an L33, so stock 799 heads. And like I said, the BTR red hot cam. Pretty easy to duplicate. And it had springs in it too, obviously, to go with that cam. Should I set the timing on the 221 V8 with a light or vacuum gauge or both? Original 62 motor unknown. Timing chain play seems to be happy with advanced pass timing indicator. Indicator 0 to 16 degrees. Did you see how much centrifugal advance the distributor has? How much is built into it? So how much? So you figure out what your total could be. I don't know what that. I don't really have a feel having never run a 221, and that's got to have a really small chamber in it, I would imagine. So I don't know how much timing that head is going to want. I'm going to assume it's going to be in the 34 or 35 range, something like that. That kind of seems to be where these small block heads want to be. Come on. We did it. I just saw a while back some guy said a 6.8 liter V10 and a Crown Vic. Just finishing up, waiting for my intercooler to get here so I can actually open it up. I plan to run at least 12 to 15 pounds to start, and they'll take 25 pounds just fine, hoping to get 300. What motor is that, John? I know he scared you with the talk. If you just go in and fluff it up, you're not going to hurt anything. But the short turn is a pretty important part. A question about C16 fuel and air inlet temperature on my 65 GTO. I have air water intercooler with 15 pounds, makes 1,500 horsepower to the tire. Airfield looks good. Air inlet temp is 90 by the end of the quarter mile. That's fine. Do you have ice? Are you running ice water in it? Richard, you don't want it to run hotter. The air inlet temperature you want to be as cold as you can. Alan's in the house. Run both intakes on the Pontiac, see if there's gains. I already ran the Edelbrock versus the factory dual plane. We did that on the 400. Cool. Did you tell me what motor that was? Yeah, I don't see what combination that is. The 92 model non-roller 351. Yep, 92 would be non-roller. Building for a project. Now, a friend who's a cam they're not able to use. 269, 277. If you guys are going to give me the cam specs, give me the duration at 50 number, not the advertised duration number, if you have it. That's going to be a fairly small cam. But you're going to need springs with that. Please don't ask me what my thoughts are. I don't know how to answer questions like that. So Richard, your GTO ran sick week. How did it do? If you're making 1,500 horsepower, that's a lot. Oh, so you're the guy that I was reading. Didn't Freiberger do a post on your car? If that's the one that he did, I thought that's the one that he did the post on that I saw. I responded to it. That's awesome that you're driving it around that much. It's fantastic. Oh, the B23. Okay, I get you. But a turbo B23 should be way more than 150 horsepower, right? Am I missing something? .716 NA. That's a good starting point for a boosted application. It's Friday. Average was 884, spicy 160, nice. 4,000 pounds. Yeah, that's very, very cool. First of all, congratulations. That's awesome. Does increasing exhaust valve size affect spooling? Increasing the exhaust valve size, I need to know what effect it has on the NA power, and I can tell you what effect it has on spooling. Richard, that's what I thought. I thought Freiberger was I thought that he made that post, and he obviously has a huge following. So if he posts something, I remember when years ago when when Brule decided he was going to do Instagram, and Freiberger made a post said, "Hey, you all need to go over and follow Brule on Instagram." We were looking at Brule's phone, and it was like this just sea of of followers coming over. It was amazing. That's what we've been on the 67 is 888. Very nice. 165 on 24 pounds. It's not a factory turbo. I'm doing all this from scratch. The MR 118 makes 112 wheel horsepower. So did you already run it stock Turbo Centra? Yeah, and the fact that it's a stick shift is very, very cool. Mr. Ed, what did you have a question about? What are you doing there? Richard, why don't you drive on down to North Carolina? I've been there before. It's I thought you were talking to the other Richard. I thought you were talking about me. I'm like, I have been there. It's a pretty far drive, although obviously, Canada and stuff. Pontiac royalty. That's right. 3,000 miles. That's a haul. What positive blower would you choose for a stock J series? I wouldn't an M90 work for that? If you can get a 112 or a 122, get that. I just don't know about what you're looking at for a cost. You can get M90s. You can find those all day long. Would it be detrimental to spooling by maybe decreasing pressure? You don't know what it's going to do. You can change the valve size on it and have it have no effect on power whatsoever, or spooling, or response, or anything. So, Richard, it sounds like I need to ask you about Pontiac stuff. Have a nice little 350 Pontiac. And I have the stuff to make a 400, I think, too. Richard, how much pride do you think I'm leaving on the table running out of the out of the box? 225 broach, track 1, 12.41, 434, 268, 270 at 50. Heads only flow 320. Well, do you know how much power you're making with that? That is that thing making mid 600s? Daniel, is that a question for me or for the real Richard that knows about Pontiac stuff? Mr. Ed, are you sure your camshaft's in right? I know that you're describing to me. I don't remember on the LT motor where the dowel orientation is compared to a small block Chevy or an LS. And I don't remember how big that cam was. What were the cam specs on it? My heads are Elbrock wide ports, but I don't think wide ports are necessary anymore. Bearing around 660. So you're right where that head should be, I would think. LT engine now should be at 3 o'clock. Okay. John, I've never run a Volvo motor on the dyno. I never even run one on the engine dyno. I did own a Volvo, an SUV a while ago, but I've never run one on the engine dyno. How's our pole doing? Is a 327 Ford with a 3.2 inch stroke better than a 347 with a 3.4 stroke? 80% saying no. With a bigger motor, bigger is better. Bad news on the 3800 I got from you. Took them to the porter for bigger valves and more porting, and they found a crack in one head. The heads, but they ran perfect. So then send them back. I will definitely take those heads back. That way I can just run them on this motor and be done with it because I know that they're going to work perfect. Uh, 248 at 50 is a really big cam, Mr. Ed. If you have stock pistons in that thing, a 248 cam's definitely not going to fit. So Turbo Sentra, 112 horsepower, 5200. That's way, way early. You ought to be making peak power a good 1,000 RPM beyond that. So ported head, cams, short runner intake. My brother wants 700 horsepower NA. It gets harder to get. Like you could make 700 horsepower NA with a 330 CFM head, but everything else has to be there. You'd have to have way more compression than that, and you have to have a dry sump. You know, you have to have all the tricks on it to get it to beat. Because let's see, 700 divided by 330. Yeah, 2.12. I mean, that's certainly doable. We've seen stuff like that before. But like I said, all the other things have to be exactly right. It's much easier if you just have a 400 CFM head. In between the valves on one cylinder. It's probably a normal area, I would imagine. I've run lots of heads like that with no problems. But like I said, we want you to be happy. So we'll end our poll at 81%, saying no. These runners are all only 4 inches. The one that I was talking about, Burns, was the one that he gave me the power numbers are on were the stock 1.8 numbers. So I'm sure the stock 1.8 numbers that were making peak power 5200 are much longer than 4 inches. I know that the new intake that he has is a short runner one. I'll be going to the dyno after rebuild, kind of run with the wastegate open to get NA results. No, that won't give you an NA results. The only way to get NA results are to take the turbo off and just put a header on it and run it NA with a header on it. Blown fuse. The cool factor favors the one of these 6 cylinders. They're not going to be anywhere near, I don't think, as much fun to drive as any kind of junkyard V8. Even if you picked a 4.8, a 4.8 is going to be up at least 100 horsepower compared to any of those. And if it's a 5.3, it's going to be way more than that, or a 6.0. Cords, what's up? I've been lucky and only done cheap, stupid stuff. It's better when it's like that. That's what I was talking about when we get a junkyard motor and you break it, you're like, that's terrible, just because of the time and inconvenience. But you know, it's a several $100 motor, not a multi-$1,000. Because I always hated putting motors that were built motors. Like when I put together stuff that was, you know, I built a couple of 555 and 565 big block Chevys with, you know, fully built. Full Fords, internals, and all that stuff, and some LSs and some small block Fords and stuff like that too. And I always hesitate to even run them because I'm like, I don't want this to go bad. The junkyard motors, you're like, man, I just hope it starts. And then when it does, you're like, okay, let's just beat the snot out of it now. But on the ones that have all the good stuff, I don't like doing that. Richard, will you ever drag race your Fox body again? Maybe. I actually had a long conversation with Chad way back about making it into a drag race car, because I haven't ever gone that route with it. I haven't ever made a drag race car, like a dedicated drag race car. It's always been a street car, but then more of a top speed road race kind of thing that also had enough power that if I wanted to take it to the drag strip, I could run it at the drag strip. But it just never hooks up and runs lots of mile an hour and no ET. The dyno number they gave us a bone stock motor. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I want to run an LK4 around 1500 horsepower. That's going to be very expensive in a mud bog truck. You're going to need everything. It's going to need to be a dedicated block and forge internals and all kinds of stuff to make it, to keep it together in that sort of environment. Richard, I do want to do a drag and drive. My buddy and I have been talking about doing Sick Week because that's down by him, doing that. And he has an NSX that we think is, it's already gone 10s. And we think by the time we would go do this, that it would be 9s. And we think that would be a fun deal. I didn't ever take the Fox to Bonneville, but I did take it to El Mirage, and we did take it to the Silver State, which is like Bonneville, except for 90 miles, not 3 miles or 5 miles, depending on what course you're on. So we went wide open throttle for a really long time, even more so out there than Bonneville. And I did some top speed events with the guys from Road and Track and stuff I set it up because I was all about top speed back then. Made a bad decision to, and in fact, I went to the Foxtrot, which was something that Tom Wilson from Super Ford put on. So it was a shootout basically between a bunch of different Fox Mustangs on a road course and oval and all kinds of stuff, drag strip, and it was fun. And then on my way back because we did that in Vegas, and on my way back, I went by to see my buddy Elmer Shannon, who was running a 280Z out at El Mirage, and I said, dude, I want to stop by and see you and say hi. And so they let me take because my car had a cage and all that stuff in it, because I had originally bought it and made it to go show them stock racing, which I did. So it had a cage and I had a harness and had a fire suit and all that stuff. And so they said, yeah, you could take it, you could make runs with this. It's not really, I don't know what class it would have been. I said, honestly, I don't care about a class. I'm not trying to set a record. I just want to make a pass down there. And so I ended up going through the lights backwards because it's really loose surface and the car spun. And all I did was, so I was going backwards like at 160 or something. And all I did was kind of close my eyes and spin the wheel. And the car came back around and started going straight. And I opened my eyes. I'm like, hey, look, I'm a hero. And they came back and everyone's like, yeah, you're a driver. You know what you're doing. I'm like, oh, no, that was not me. That was God reaching his hand down and going, you are going in the wrong direction. And something bad is going to happen here. So we're going to kind of spin you around here and get you going straight. And you can tell everybody that you're a hero. And but you and I both know that you're not. So I told them what's up. Any findings on an Eaton 2V 4500 versus a 4V on an Eaton below 4500? Yeah, I did, Sebastian. The 4V and the 2V are very, very comparable down there. So it would be very, very similar in terms of power. Below 4500, they could be about the same. .53 LS or 5.7 LS6. What are you doing with them, and what is your question about, and how much power do you want to make? And if I was going to do a boosted application, it would be the 5.3. If I was going to do an NA application, it'd be the 5.7. And the 5.7 is also going to be aluminum, so it's going to be better unless you get aluminum 5.3. Did you ever make bad decisions with your Hondas? Yeah, I got some really good stories with the Honda when we were doing our closed course testing at Area 52. Made some bad decisions there. We're at 2 hours and running NA. I don't know how hard it is to take is your turbo stuff all up front? Because, I mean, to run it NA, you don't even have to make an exhaust. Just run the header like out the front of the car when you're running on the dyno. Because it's only going to be a temporary thing. You you have all the turbo stuff, so it's all ready to go. So it's running turbocharged. You take the exhaust manifold, unhook the lines, cap the oil line or whatever, take that out, set it aside, put the NA header that aims out the front of the thing, because we've done this many times. Just, it doesn't have to go under the car. If it will go under the car, that's fine, whatever. Just put the header on, bolt it in place, make some wax, NA, 3 or 4 of them, whatever. Take that off, and then, while you're letting it cool, you can take that off and put the turbo stuff back on, and then start doing your turbo stuff. All of that is easily done if you practice it. It's easily done while it's on the dyno. Because if you already have had everything running and working when it's turbocharged, and you drove in there NA and then put the turbo on, and all you're having to do is bolt the turbo all assembly on, hook up a feed and a drain line, and then the discharge tubes and stuff. That's really simple. That's just like putting a header on. It's pain to remove the turbo. It's on top. Has the BTR Trek Norris cam failed in any of your testing? No, I've only run 3 or 4 of them, but no, I've never had any issue with them. Would a GM L6 factory spring look like a good choice for a comp 274 cam? I don't think that it has enough. I don't think it has enough seat pressure or open pressure for that camshaft. Using Speedmaster LS-Studs a bad decision. I don't know. I've had people tell me that they've used them. I've tried a couple of their bolt sets, and the ones that I tried were, I think, big block and small block, and they were super stretchy. I would not use them. But in fact, we didn't. We ended up taking them out. What heads are better for a 5.3 LS for NA? I have 706 heads, then you're fine. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to make lots of power, then I would put some kind of ported head on there. Does a 2V PI top end make more power on a 3V block? Because of the piston is different? You could just put it on a non-PI one. Have you done a video of a stock LQ4 turbos? I found a lot of modified 6-liter turbo videos, no stock ones. Just curious what a completely stock LQ4 make with ring gap and boost. Yeah, it makes about 400 NA when you run it stock. And then, so that'll make 800 with 14.5 pounds of boost. You can Turbo Century, you can rebuild it and make it more user friendly, but it might not be that critical for you to have the NA power output. I just like having it because then it tells me that everything is right with the motor before I add boost to it and start going down that route. Is retorquing 20-year-old head bolts a bad decision? I don't. You shouldn't need to retorque those. We retorque. Sometimes we retorque ARP stuff. I didn't retorque any of the Big Bang stuff. 5.3 has 175,000 miles on and being rebuilt. Should I get my 5.3 board out? If you want. I mean, if you're putting pistons in it anyway, are you putting forged pistons in it? Then you can make it bigger. You have a lot of steps to go between a 3.780 and a 3.902 or a 3.905, which is a 3.890 would be a stock 5.7 bore, or a 3.902 or a 3.905 would be the overbore versions of those. Would 2 GT25s be enough for a 5.4? I only want 600 horsepower to help preserve the drivetrain. The thing that I'm worried about, though, is that you're going to have immediate boost response and lots of torque with those small turbos. I have reused in the past I think that the Honda stuff is torque to yield. The factory Honda bolts, and we've reused those time and time again. And I've reused LS head bolts too, but I've never done it for something that I was going to drive once a week or something like that, or anything that I was going to go in a car. Richard, same engine NA versus boosted for low RPM cruise. I experienced way better low RPM cruising with a turbo attached back pressure. You probably don't have any back pressure under cruise because you don't have any load on the turbo and you're not creating any positive pressure. So the back pressure is only going to be there when you have positive pressure. So I'm curious why. I'm actually curious now because I saw that you mentioned that earlier. I'm curious why there would be a difference. It shouldn't tame the cam timing down at all. Jonathan, I don't know how long it's going to hold up under your mud bog truck. You're going to have to try it. It won't hold up. A stock block or stock bottom end is not going to hold up a 1500 horsepower. Not doing that. New head bolts are definitely the answer. How can you fight torque steer with a high horsepower front wheel drive car? I never really thought it was an issue. My Focus was like that. The Sprint, although it was 100 horsepower. Nathan, I don't have an answer to your question. Normally more engine speed is better, but I think guys could end up getting the same thing. Edward, with your 408, you can get to 1,000 horsepower with one turbo or two. Excuse me, your choice there is just going to be packaging. I'm curious to see what's happened with the. I might have to fly back there to help those guys to get that motor out and stuff. I want to get the 2.2 out of the Omni now and put it back together, and just make sure everything's right. Can head bolts be swapped one at a time with ARP without tearing an engine apart? I think it can. I think we've done that on the dyno. Change the bolts one at a time. Just so you don't disturb the head gasket. If it's a new head gasket that I put on there, I honestly wouldn't care about it anyways. But it'd be nice not to have to take everything else apart. One more minute. We never had a poll. So we got to have a short poll here. Oh, we did have a poll. Never mind. I'm forgetting. We've got a Gen 5 454. I heard you can go to 525 on it. Are you talking about, Mark, are you talking about 525 cubic inches? If that's the question, then no, the answer is no on that. If it's 525 horsepower, the answer is yes on that. .706 heads are good for 5.3s and 4.8s. They're really good. Mark, 525 cubic inches. 496 is the usual size for. You might be able to put more stroke in it, but I don't recommend it. What's the max for an LQ4 forged bottom end running twins? Well, if once you fix the problematic piston and rod, and then I guess, because I don't know if the crankshaft is going to go before the block does. The block is going to move around. So if you're wanting to try to run 1500 horsepower, you'll need a block. Cameron, thank you. How much fuel pressure for Rochester AA turtle? I don't know what that is. What's a Rochester AA turtleback? Mark, that's good. Like I said, if you can put a 4, what do we do? 4 3/8 stroke in it and make it bigger than a 496. But I hate those crankshafts in big blocks because they're nothing but windage problems. And I don't, and we don't normally go more than 60 over. I have seen guys go 100 over on stuff, but again, I wouldn't do it unless you sonic it. The normal, what most people do is a 496. And so as you go further away from what we know works all the time, you go into areas where it might not work. A 4-500 stroking, yeah, that'd be way worse with a stock sleeve length, and it'd be very, very windagey. Alan, the piston guys were either, I don't remember who it was exactly because I talked to a couple of people. It's not those guys. Not those guys. Molly, I talked to, so maybe them. And then the other guy that I talked to. No, nope. How many other piston guys? Was it Icon were the other guys, maybe? JE? I don't know, it was somebody. That's what happens when you do like 30 of those. Let's see which one. I don't see the thing here. But if you look it up, it'll be online. Nathan, 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore will get you to whatever boost level you want. Will a 5.346 stroker with C heads greatly outperform a 5.4? I don't know how you're going to get to 5.3 liter with a 4.6 stroker. And Mark, especially if you're going to do a turbo on it, I don't even think that I would go with a 496. You could just make it a 454. And if you wanted to make 1,000 horsepower, you could do that with a 454. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be a 496 or a 500 and whatever inch motor. Most of the guys, when they're going 500 inches, use the big bore stuff. I don't have any big block stuff for sale, I don't think. What's a horsepower limit of an LS3 block? Here's will be the last question for tonight. We normally don't take that LS3 block more than about 1,000 horsepower. The blocks that we do take more than that are the iron blocks, and then the aluminum 5.3 blocks. We'll take those. Those seem to have more sleeve thickness and stuff, and so guys are making lots and lots of power with the iron or with the aluminum LS3 blocks or the aluminum 5.3 blocks. and then any of the iron blocks, but not the LS1, LS2, or LS3 aluminum blocks. And on that note, it's time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. We'll be back in the morning.